great athletes, namely Michael Jordan and Kobe Bryant. People call it obsession. To me, it's more a dedication to the craft that they chose to do as a living. It's a certain level of respect for your audience. They want you to put up a show, put up a performance. And I didn't want to make excuses for a mediocre performance. I wanted to be sure that I gave my everything that I could, so I wouldn't have any doubts at the end.
On the Dallas Opera Network, you're listening to Opera Box Score.
Let's get ready to rumble!
Wherever you are, however you're listening, it's America's talk radio show about opera. It's Opera Box Score. I'm your host, Weston Williams, joined by Oliver Camacho and... All right, this week in Chalk Talk, the summer road trip goes into its fourth round as Oliver files a field report from the Santa Fe Opera. And then Oliver goes inside the huddle with Duke Kim. Duke is wrapping up his summer as a young artist at Santa Fe Opera, singing Lysander in A Midsummer Night's Dream. Find out how Oliver's new tenor crush used the pandemic to work on his three-pointers and is building momentum for the fall season, assuming we have one. Plus, in the 2-minute drill, another opera company joins the Vax Vox Populi, say that 5 times fast. And if you're watching via the Dallas Opera Network, subscribe to our podcast on Stitcher or just favorite our show on Apple Podcasts for the full episode. Without further ado, Oliver, I'm so glad you're here and no one else.
Yeah, I was gone for a couple of days. I was in Santa Fe. We're going to talk about that really soon. I am glad to be back in Chicago where I digest my food properly. There is something about the altitude.
Desert air.
No, it's the altitude of Santa Fe. It's like 7,000 feet above sea level. And it just, everything is like harder to process. It's harder to breathe. You just feel tired more easily. And for whatever reason, my tummy was not happy for like 80% of the time that I was there. So I bought myself some chewable gas pills, and I took a fiber supplement at one point, but we don't need to go too much into that.
This is the kind of quality content that our audience comes to us for. Let's go ahead and talk some opera.
Chalk Talk on Opera Box Score.
All right, Oliver, you had a little vacation there for a couple of weeks.
Hardly. I mean, I'm so grateful to the PR team at Santa Fe Opera for making my first experience at Santa Fe very deluxe. And I did get to do a couple of interviews while I was there, some for my other job at WFMT, but some for the podcast. So we're going to hear 3 interviews over the course of the next couple of weeks that I conducted, including one today. But I have to say that, you know, people talk about Santa Fe Opera Company, how it's like the most beautiful place to see opera in the US. And I'm like, yeah, sure, great. You know, I'm like, we've done so many stories about Santa Fe over the years. I'm like, okay, I haven't really thought that much about it because I've never been. I don't know from firsthand experience. And if you've never been, boy, oh boy, this is going to be a commercial for New Mexico. I mean, it's just so breathtakingly beautiful. And I don't know if it's because of the mountains, it creates like its own like microclimate, but the sky looks different every day, and actually hour to hour it looks different. And then we have like the fires happening over there in California, so we're getting also like some smoke, and which makes the sky sometimes like purple, and like it's just being in New Mexico and then being up at that higher elevation in Santa Fe, it just is a different like experience than what we have here in Chicago, which is like skyscrapers, and you know, the skies look pretty much the same all the time.
And instead of gas pills, we have deep dish pizza.
Exactly. Floating in the sky. Yeah. So one thing that is remarkable right away about going to Santa Fe is that once you get off the highway, there's like this separate road that takes you to the opera, and it's like a narrow road, and you're kind of you keep going up. And when you get to the top of this road, they put you like in the sorting hat. Like, are you like important, or are you, because of what they're doing this year is they're streaming their performances to a different parking lot, like the lower level parking lot. So people who couldn't get a ticket for the house were able to like sit in their car and watch it. I think it's like $100 per car. So you can like pack your car full of like 10 people and you each saw the opera for $10, you know? But anyway, they sort you. And because, thank you very much, PR team, I was able to go to Gryffindor. One of the things you notice is that there are people who tailgate at this opera, and like they really come like probably an hour before the show, and they bring tables and tablecloths and stemware, and they have beautiful picnics out in the parking lot. And there's also these beautiful benches where you can like just walk just ever so slightly away from the parking lot and be like in nature. And it's just, next time I go, I'm going to definitely try to do that, because I wasn't so happy with the restaurant choices near the opera. So maybe my own assembled picnic will be much more delicious. But no, it's so romantic and so sweet. I think it's a great evening if you plan it correctly. And they start their shows at 8:00. And it's my understanding that earlier in the summer, the shows start at 8:30. So they're always trying to time the show with like
that
dusk.
Makes sense.
Yeah. And so, yeah, can you imagine going to see Marriage of Figaro at 8:30? You're not out until after midnight,
Yeah,
Marriage of Figaro, I saw it starting at 8, and it was almost midnight when we were, getting to the car. So, anyway.
You have to really rely on those zany antics to keep you awake.
That's one of the quirks of Santa Fe. Something else that I'm sure I could have figured out by looking at photos of Santa Fe Opera, but you don't realize it till you're there, is that it's an open air venue, yes.
Sure.
And just to the left and right of the proscenium are like little cutouts so you can see the sky. But what you don't realize immediately until the show starts is that there's also a cutout at the back of the stage. So you can be looking at the stage and see the sky behind the stage. And sometimes they use this to great dramatic effect, where they make nature part of the set design. And
the sun does make a pretty solid lamp for the lighting designer to use.
And if you're lucky, which happened to us a couple of times, like sometimes the action coincides with weather events, like a little lightning or, whatever. It gets very dark in the third act, for example, So that was really cool. And like, I think that trick was used in 3 out of the 4 operas that I saw, and each time it worked. It's like you can't get tired of that trick. It's like Montserrat Caballé's floated high notes, So, one thing I'll say is that I don't know how they constructed this space, but you don't feel the breeze. And even though you're outside, it can get cold, but you don't feel wind, which is great. So like you're not freezing. It also can be a little bit stifling if it's really warm, because you would like some breathe. But I assume that that's designed so that the orchestra pit's music isn't like flying all over the place or whatnot.
Yeah, that would make it a little difficult to get through Eugene Onegin at least.
Yeah. So we saw all 4 shows, my traveling companion and I. And our first show on the menu was Marriage of Figaro, which is all about this set, which is like sort of like a Downton Abbey upstairs, downstairs type of set. And it's very modern, and lots of doors closing, and there's like these gears on the stage, which like remind you of a clock or make you think of like, oh, the wheels are turning, type of thing. It was all fine. But the person who stole the show was the Susanna, the Chinese soprano Ying Feng. And she gratefully is one of my interview guests. We will hear that interview next week. They had this interesting thing happen with their artists. A lot of them couldn't get visas. And so the original cast, there were these replacements that were announced after they went to the printer with their beautiful booklet that they give you as the program, which is like a comprehensive essays and casts, and it's a very nice souvenir from the festival. So Nicholas Brownlee, who is our podcasting rival and our colleague
and friend of the show,
Dallas Network, he stepped in for Ashlee Riches in the role of Figaro. Then we were able to see the world premiere, not the prima, but the world premiere opera by John Corigliano and Mark Adamo called Lord of Cries, which is a vehicle for Anthony Roth Costanzo. It really is like everything you like about Anthony Roth Costanzo happens in this opera.
What isn't to like about Anthony Roth Costanzo,
he has
Oliver?
great color tour moments, very diva movement on stage, amazing costumes. This role is really tailor-made for all of Anthony Roth Costanzo's specific talents, and I cannot imagine anybody else in this opera besides him in this kind of vampire role that he plays. Also in the cast, David Portillo, Jarrett Ott, who is one of the original Bear Hunks, and he is still as hunky as ever. There is this really weird trio of wayward women, and it's sort of like the Three Graces, or like Echo, Dryad, and Naiad, or the three women in Magic Flute, like that type of vocal writing where they're always singing in trio. And John Corigliano set these weird women in a very strange way. Like there was like a low voice, a high soprano, and then a extremely high soprano, like crazy high, like high Q. So whenever they sang, you heard this chord that had a lot of upper notes and just one fundamental note. And the high note was so high. Like the opening note for this role is a high D. And I think she never got to sing a note below the staff. Like it was like, and I was like, I felt so bad for her, but she nailed it. Her name was Leah Brzezinski. And congratulations, Leah. I mean, she stole the show every time she was on stage, because everybody in the audience acknowledged, like, oh my God, that is so hard what she's doing. And congratulations to the understudy of the lead soprano role, Lucy, that was played by Catherine Henry, who was a young artist and was pulled out of some of her young artist duties to become this very difficult heroine in this show. And she did an incredible job. Catherine Henry, remember that name. It feels like it's going to be a dramatic soprano voice, like a Semiramis type of voice. Very exciting singing, very difficult writing for this role. But she pulled it off, and she sounded great while she was doing it. And she stood toe to toe with Anthony Roth Costanzo and Jared Ott. And was really blown away. Young artist, cum star. It was like a star-making turn for her. Then we have Eugene Onegin, which was really a vehicle for Lucas Meacham, who wasn't the original Eugene Onegin. Is actually was Etienne Dupuis was cast in that role with his wife Nicole Carr singing Tatiana, both of whom I believe couldn't get visas. So Lucas Meacham was Onegin, and soprano Sarah Jukabiak sang what's the role? Tatiana. But I have to say, the sort of the scene stealer was the Olga, a very willowy, beautiful soprano, mezzo soprano with a gorgeous tone. Avery, I think her name was Amaroa. I should have looked this up. Amaro. But she was fantastic, and I'd never heard her before. And just a gorgeous, gorgeous performance overall. But Lucas Meacham is the man, and I actually got an interview with him, which I'm going to put on my other platform on WFMT. He's going to do a playlist of his favorite versions of Largo a Factotum, Figaro's aria. So you can look forward to that if you follow me on WFMT. And our last show was Britain's A Midsummer Night's Dream, hence the name of this episode. It's our Midsummer Night team of Weston and Oliver. That's just a
really, really well written episode title. Yeah. Just a really good job.
Our Oberon was our friend of the show, Yesen Davies. Titania, as opposed to Titania, or as opposed to Tatiana. Titania was Aaron Morley, who will be one of our future OBS guests. And in the role of Lysander, one of the four lovers, is tenor Duke Kim, who we're going to talk to very shortly.
Wow.
Just once again, thank you to PR team at Santa Fe for making my first experience very deluxe. They kept giving me these drink vouchers, like every time I got my tickets. I'm not kidding you. There was like 4 drink vouchers or 6 drink vouchers.
The more drinks you get, the better your opinion gets.
Am I going to be able to? I mean, even if I was like sharing them with my companion, who was like almost a teetotaler, like, am I going to drink 3 drinks over the course of the opera? Like, so thank you very much. I still have some leftovers. Maybe I'll save them or for next year, my drink vouchers. So, but it was they really did such a great job of setting me up with these artists and giving me access to John Corigliano and Marco Adamo, for example. And just, I think their staff in general, like their box office staff, their house staff was so charming. I have to say, and those of you who've been to Santa Fe this year know what I'm talking about. It felt like Anthony Roth Costanzo hired all the ushers. They were all so like gender nonconforming, beautiful.
We love that.
Yeah. I was like, this is a thing here. It's like, yeah. And it really added to the magic of this year's festival. So congratulations on your HR department as well.
Well, Oliver left his heart in Santa Fe, but luckily we have a recording of an interview where he showed a little bit of it, and in his latest crush, Duke Kim, coming right up in Inside the Huddle.
Huddle up. Let's go inside the huddle.
Because they left, all the sports people kind of left us hanging for this episode. I did want to read this little note before we get into the interview here. She writes, "Da Bears are back, baby. Dear Justin Fields, thank you. Love, Chicago." I think I know what that means.
That's from Ashlee, our co-host. So a little bit of inside baseball, or inside Oliver's baseball. Tenor Duke Kim was a finalist for the Ryan Opera Center here at Lyric Opera Chicago. And that was the year they didn't take a tenor. And I thought for sure he was going to get it because his audition, his first aria, which was Lenski's aria from Eugene Onegin, I thought it was so heartfelt and sang with such gorgeous tone. They asked for Dalla Sua Pace as his second aria, and he choked at the end. And I would never have asked Duke about that, but Duke was very forthcoming with how that audition went in the pre-interview. So we included that conversation about how that audition went. And he was, thank you very much, Duke, for being so brave as to share your audition nightmare story with us. But no problem. Duke is doing so well now as he's doing his second summer as we speak at Santa Fe. And he was cast in a lead role, which not all apprentices get to do. He won, or he was one of the winners of the, what do you call that competition now? The Metropolitan National Opera Competition, which is now called the Eric
and Dominique Lafont competition, which really rolls off the tongue.
Yeah, exactly.
When COVID hit, I knew it was also, it was double-edged sword. Everything was to a halt, but it also meant I could go into my practicing cave and sharpen my sword, right? And I wanted to come out swinging. I didn't want to be one of the rusty ones. I wanted to be the sharpest coming out of this pandemic. And it's, everything came to a stop, and it was like a limbo for everybody. And during that time, I watched a lot of interviews of these great athletes, namely Michael Jordan and Kobe Bryant, because I like their, people call it obsession, quote unquote obsession, but it's to me it's more a dedication to the craft that they chose to do as a living. And it's a certain level of respect for your audience. They pay good money to pay for the ticket, and they want you to put up a show, put up a performance. And I didn't want to make excuses for a mediocre performance. I wanted to be sure that I gave my everything that I could, so I wouldn't have any doubts at the end. And yeah, I mean, Kobe famously, it was his first season, I think, and high school basketball, he came straight from high school to the Lakers to the NBA, so that's crazy. But he said high school, they have maybe 1 or 2 games a week, and it'd be fine. He'd get plenty of rest. NBA, they play 3, sometimes 4, I think, games, a lot of games, a lot more, and you get little breaks. And he said during these long stretches, he would shoot 3-pointers, and they would be in the right direction, but they would be short. So he knew that he had to strengthen his legs. And next season, he came with stronger legs, and he started landing threes. And that taught me a lot, and that's how I operate too. I record a whole bunch when I'm on the Santa Fe stage, especially whenever I'm in a big house, because I can experiment with my sound and try this and then see how it sounds out there and then adjust. And that's been the biggest blessing for me when I got here and doing Lysander, a leading role, because I could sing with the orchestra often on stage, and I could experiment with my sound. And David Lomeli gave me a little tip about, maybe you should just lift a little more and sing in a more like NG position. And I tried that, and that really made my sound travel far better, because that was one of my problems. I had a pretty voice, but I felt like it was falling flat, and that gave me so much more distance and clarity and squillo, and it's easier on the voice. So I'm kind of like these athletes that that are obsessed with these things, and I solve these puzzles one by one, and hopefully one day I'll be happy with my result. Yeah.
Good call. Bad call on Opera Box Score.
Good call, bad call. Oh, wait, hang on a second. I need to put on my George impression. Weston? Oh, wait, you don't have one because I'm George. Oliver, do you have a good call for me?
Yeah, I mean, we're in the doldrums of summer. Is that what you say? We're in the dog days.
Yeah.
And
dog days, doldrums, who knows?
There isn't so much happening operatically outside of the summer festivals that we're not going to. So I'll bring it back to Santa Fe and to that soprano once again. Her name is Catherine Henry. Look out for her. She is going to be the poop.
And that is it for this week's edition of America's Talk radio show about opera. Our announcer is Norm Woodel. He's at normwoodel.com. On Facebook, search for Opera Box Score. On Twitter and Instagram, we're at Opera Box Score. Help us deepen our bench of listeners by liking and sharing our social media posts. Email us your hot takes at operaboxscore@gmail.com, or subscribe to our podcast on Stitcher, or just favorite the show on Apple Podcasts. The views and opinions expressed on Opera Box Score are solely those of the show's creative team. Any rebroadcast, reproduction, or other use of the accounts of this show without the express written consent of Opera Box Score is, spoiler alert, what killed the victim in White Lotus. Ooh. Our creative consultant is Oliver Camacho. Our audio and video editor is me. For our guest, Duke Kim, I'm Weston Williams, asking you to continue the conversation about opera, even if most of the OBS team is not. We're back with an all-new show next week when soprano Yin Fang goes inside the huddle to talk about being the Mozart it girl of the moment. Plus, you get more opera headlines, more hot takes, and more historic backdrops hiding in your attic. Join us.